Okay, hello.
Hi.
First up, one of the things I read about you is you like science fiction.
I love science fiction and
I
fantasy.
also do, and I know that because one of the subjects of your book is you traveled the country driving the trucks. So I'm going to ask you, did you ever see a UFO?
I didn't, though I did drive through New Mexico and saw lots of people fascinated by UFOs. But I did not actually see one myself.
You haven't been sitting there in the middle of the night, laying back on the hood of your big rig, look up and see nothing like that.
Nope, saw nothing.
Okay. So you are in Fairbanks today. Welcome to the Golden Heart City here in Alaska. And you're speaking on the Fairbanks campus tonight at 5:30 in the Bunnell building. Are you reading from Semi-Queer? Are you just talking about stuff? Is there what could people expect tonight?
I'm talking about it. I don't read. It's more of me giving a kind of summary with stories from the truckers I talk to. I'm focusing in that talk in particular about truck stops and the culture of truck stops and the people who come in and out of them, things that happen there, a lot of conversations about sex.
So it's not for 13 and up, 18 and up? Is it not for kids? Or I guess it depends on how educated and that sort of stuff your kids are.
Yep.
Well, did you find I have so much stuff to ask you. I know we could talk all day about it. But since truck stops is the focus of tonight, we pass truck stops all the time. So we see stuff that when we're traveling on interstates or all over the country. What is it like there? Is it like is it a resort? Is it a party atmosphere? Is it frightening? Is it comfortable? What is it? What is the culture of truck stops for truckers?
It's definitely a place of community. So truck stops are the same as gas stations, right? Like it's not a separate world. There's a sort of an invisible line in a truck stop between the place truckers use where the, diesel fuel is and the laundry machines. It's the same space as a gas station. You just kind of go to the trucker area. But it is a place where truckers have this schedule where after driving 70 hours, they take a 34-hour reset, and that typically happens at a truck stop. So it's a place where you can meet and talk to other truckers, feel connected to trucker community, talk about what's happening, who's good to work for. So there is a lot of community that happens there. Sometimes there's a lot of partying. It varies. Sometimes there's a lot of kind of sleaze. Certainly common in particular truck stops. I mean, some truck stops are known for high sleaze factor. But it is like there are truck stops that are frequented by particular sub-communities. So there are truck stops where Punjabi truckers go. There are truck stops where queer truckers are more likely to go. And they are a place where truckers meet each other and kind of bond and talk about their job experiences. Because it's such a lonely job that having an opportunity to meet other people and talk to them is really valued.
And one of the things that you, I've only been able to read portions from Semi-Queer to sort of get the idea of what is going on. But one of the things that you talk about is the different reasons that people get involved, that take on the job of being a trucker. Either a job they had before has fallen through, and then this makes itself apparent to them, or you yourself. And that's one of the things about the book. It's not like you went undercover. You are a licensed truck driver, and you just talked to the people that were around you. Were you surprised at sort of the way the community segments itself? Was it unexpected, or did you sort of expect to find that when you took on this job?
Oh, no, it was totally unexpected. I mean, my first book is about gay, lesbian, and transgender steelworkers. And when I was doing research for
that is also a fascinating. Anyway, keep on going.
But that research, the people that I interviewed there were very hidden. It was hard to find them. I worked for a long time to establish a kind of visibility in steelwork community, to feel like they trusted me. I mean, it took a long time to build up 40 people that would talk to me. And they were very hidden at work for cultural and safety reasons. So when I started trucking, which I did because I wanted to be a trucker, I was completely surprised by how many out queer and trans people there were. Just everywhere I went. There were out queer and trans people who were, you know, I would go up to them and say like, whoa, it's cool to see you. I didn't expect to see you out here. And they'd be like, yeah, let's talk about that. And they were totally fun and wild and out there and happy to talk about it. And that was such a surprise based on what had happened with my first book. Like, I knew there would be queer truckers because we're everywhere. I mean, that's just a given, but I thought they would be hiding. And they're totally not hiding.
In Semi-Queer, there's a bunch of illustrations and photos that people have given you to use.
Yeah. And if you look at my steelworker book, that is not true. Every steelworker I contacted, the only steelworkers who appear are trans ones who, you know, can't hide that, right? So some trans steelworkers were willing to contribute their photos, but no gay or lesbian people allowed their photo to be included in that book. Whereas with the truckers, I just kind of sent an email to people I had talked to and said like, hey, your photo. And everyone was like, sure, here are 10. So, you know, you can tell just from that, like how different.
Is that the personality of, and you talk a little bit about that in the book, the personality of the truckers are like, hey, it's just me. This is my life. You know, take it or leave it. This is what I'm delivering to you. Is this me?
Yeah.
One of the things,
and it's partly that it's a different job culture, right? So a steel mill is a very closed culture. You know the people you work with. Those are the people that keep you safe. You live in the same community as them. It's a very tight-knit work community. And trucking isn't like that. You're constantly moving. You almost never see the same people. The job keeps you endlessly circulating. So it's a much different kind of work environment that contributes to the different amount of sort of publicity.
Can you try to plan meetups? Like, hey, I'm on my way to like texting. I know not CBs so much anymore, but do you plan, I'll be in this area, so maybe we can meet up at this truck stop and I'll see you, we'll hang out for a few hours. Is that something that you're able to do?
At a 34-hour reset, you can. I mean, most truckers are on the clock all the time and they don't have any time for shit like that, right? So they might love to meet other truckers, but if they do, it's going to be for just a minute and running. They are always moving. They're paid by the mile, right? So if they stop and hang out with another trucker for 2 hours, that's severely cutting into their profit and they just can't afford it. Like, it's very on the clock, endlessly moving job.
That's one of the things that you write a little bit about, is that people thought, you know, I might get in this, going to be be my own boss, and I'm going to see the country, and it's going to be like a vacation on wheels. But there's technology that monitors everything that you do, the speed you go, as fast as you go. And so the sort of description that I read was, it's a lot more restrictive even now than it was like during the 1970s.
Totally, yeah. Technology is doing that. So there'll be two-way cameras that monitor the road in front of you, but they also frequently look back at you. So literally you're like being endlessly surveilled when you're out there and micromanaged half to death. And that I also didn't experience. So to get back to the things I didn't expect the amount of queers, right? I did not expect that. And I thought it was going to be like free. I had that image in my head of like, I will set my schedule, I'll pick my routes, it'll be great, I'll get to see stuff. No, it's not free. It's like the most micromanaged, hyper-controlled job ever with a huge amount of paperwork, which I did not expect. And also, I thought white people were truckers. Like, I had a completely outdated version of who's driving. And that's partly because, you know, stereotypes, but also because so much of trucker scholarship still being written today is about white men, cis white men. And that's not who's driving truck anymore, right? Like now, I would say less than half of truckers are white men. If you go through California, you're just not going to see white people driving truck. And, you know, increasing amounts of women, increasing amount of queers, increasing amount of immigrants, Mexicans, African Americans. There is just an incredible blossoming of diversity in the trucker workforce. And I hadn't expected that either.
And one of the things that you say when you talked about the divisiveness that's in the United States right now, and when you talk to campers about it, one of the things that they said was, yeah, that's been our life forever. So is the trucker community, and I wrote down not necessarily a microcosm, but like a shadow where the United States truth it grows? Like if you looked at that, is it an accurate representation of our country at the time?
Yeah, I mean, think about how technology is shaping our lives right now. There's a way that what happens with trucking, if you look at trucking closely, it gives you a lot of insight into what's happening with the larger culture as a whole. So the way that surveillance, hidden cameras, micromanagement, the sense that someone is always like watching and judging you, that happens to truckers first, but it's coming for all of us. I really think that. Sort of the way that all of our movements and actions and financial transactions are so kind of, technology is keeping track of everything. Like just the way that Facebook works. So, you know, exactly. But if you're sort of thinking, maybe my furnace is going to break, the next time you log on, they're trying to sell you a furnace. Like just the kind of way that that becomes an invisible part of everyday life in such a way that you don't really notice. That happened to truckers first.
One of the things it's, and I think that it's we don't really think about all the cameras that are watching us all the time, and so are people held accountable for that? Like when you report in, or like we saw you singing along to Taylor Swift on your truck, and that's not the brand we want here. We want to make sure you're listening to, you know, Nine Inch Nails when you're out there driving. Like, do you get feedback from what people have seen of what you're doing?
Sure, yeah, all the time. I mean, one of the trans women that I interviewed, portable toilets are not legal on trucks, right? But many truckers have portable toilets because you're often stranded at a customer on the roadside somewhere. You know, what are you going to do? So a lot of people have some form of portable toilet or a, you know, bucket with cat litter in it or something that they can use in an emergency situation. But it isn't legal, and mega carriers don't allow it. So one of the truckers that I talked to was driving down the road like you do, and trucks have automatic braking now. So if you get too close to another vehicle, which is the point, but also like a traffic cone or a barrier or something, the automatic braking applies itself, and you don't have any control over that, right? So she's driving on the road, and there's some of those barrels that they have for road construction by the side. And, you know, it's a construction, so the road is narrowed. So she gets really close to it on one side, and the truck automatically brakes really hard. And, you know, if you don't like know this is going to happen, you don't like gradual it. So the truck brakes real hard, and the portable toilet slides through the curtain and into the front of the truck, which is going to happen if you brake real suddenly. And because it was sudden braking, the company gets that video to evaluate what happened in that incident and sees the toilet come forward. That kind of stuff happens all the time. So a company is going to use that as a way to police and control queers or other truckers that they consider like vulnerable or that they might want to try to extra surveil. So in the case of this trucker, they're like, you can't have that portable toilet. And she's like, listen, I'm trans. You know what's happening in bathrooms these days. She's like, I don't super want to go into the bathroom on a lot of truck stops. I'm just trying to be safe out here. And they're like, too bad. You can't have that. That's your choice. Take your risks on your own. So, you know, it happens all the time. That's just like one example of the kind of way that systems of surveillance are uneven and always kind of create this sort of sense of looming threat. And the more vulnerable you are, the more you feel subject to that sense of looming threat.
That sense of looming threat, as you described, that's, as in my life, that is not something that I feel a lot. But I hear people describe that feeling all of the time. Is that something that you might go into being a trucker to escape from the regular job, but then find it's even worse in that environment?
Sure. I mean, if you're a woman, you experience a sense of looming threat, right? That's just a given with the situation of women anywhere in the world, right? And if you're non-white, you're going to experience it anytime police are involved, anything like that. If you're trans, you experience it. If you're trans and non-white, you extra experience it, right? So if you're in a work situation where people are harassing you, microaggressions, a sense of kind of endless criticism, trucking might feel like an escape, like you get on the road and leave. And they do describe that feeling and how like freeing and fun it is to have crappy work situations happen, get in the truck and drive away. Like it is a feeling of empowerment, and you kind of take on how the truck makes you feel important and large and physical and, you know, magic. But frequently it also puts you by yourself in the middle of nowhere where no one can hear you scream, subject to these kind of web of surveillance regulations. So it is escape, but it's also, you know, technology means nowhere is unsupervised.
You mentioned that, and there's a beautiful section in the book where you have some quotes about that idea. And the thing that I did, you take on the personality and the physicality of the truck that you're driving. And one of the things that made me think is, in some of the anime and the science fiction stuff, or Pacific Rim, you get inside that mech, and then you have the power of the machine along with you. It gives that confidence. What is that like for you? Like when you sit in that big chair, do you feel, can you feel the road underneath you? Do you feel the speed and the strength and the power of the vehicle you're driving?
Totally. I mean, the driving is such a rush, driving a truck, right? There are all these gears. You have to clutch in and out. You have to learn how to float the gears by watching the tachometer. And you have to be so physically engaged all the time in order to make this happen, right? So you have to be like paying attention to what's ahead of you, watching your tandems. It just really requires your whole body and mind to be there. And the truck kind of works as an extension of you. You're kind of watching the dials, watching the tandems, watching the sides, and it becomes almost like Pacific Rim, like you said. It becomes this sort of huge extension of you. And if you're someone who takes shit from the world all the time, that just feels so magic. The way that then both you have this physical connection, you know, like, you know how clutching feels, you know how like when you gear up or gear down and that kind of the rotation, the kind of pulsing of the engine, like it's a very physical sensation driving, and you're sitting right there, you know? So it really, I mean, it makes you feel alive. It makes you feel engaged. It makes you, and since you know that what you're doing is so important, right? Like nothing would function in the world without trucking. Everything that we eat, wear, do, have, we couldn't do it without truckers, and they know that. So if you combine that with kind of the physical, engaged fun of driving and feeling important, it's, I mean, the job is micromanaged and irritating and underpaid, but the rewards are so, I mean, there's nothing like it, right? Like
the quote you say,
important, and yeah.
You say, they'll hate me, but they say hello to my truck.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the thing that you just talked about, I don't want to get into this too much, but there's the autonomous vehicles is definitely, that development of the technology could change drastically the culture and the business of trucking. Is that something that you've heard people talk about?
Truckers talk about it some. Certainly, I believe it's happening, and it's happening right now, right? Amazon already has driverless trucks out there. They're on the road. It's happening. And there are 3.5 million truckers, and no labor strategy is in place to talk to these people about what jobs are going to become open to them, available to them, like what's going to happen. And it's going to happen really, really fast. I truly think that. I mean, the cost savings for trucking companies is enormous, and nothing is going to stop them from doing this. So we as a country have to do something to help retrain truckers so that they can work in the autonomous trucking industry or make something else possible. Like truckers could be the people who learn how to repair these things, but some, you know, retraining is going to be required for that to happen. So that's something I would like to kind of get in a conversation about, is what it would take to support and retrain truckers through this. instead of just give those jobs to like Silicon Valley white boys, because that's what's going to happen if nothing gets done about it.
Here
and
in
they already have jobs, and they don't need this.
Alaska has, a pretty basic road structure when you're outside the main cities. You can drive from Fairbanks to Anchorage. There's, maybe one road that goes down there. We pass trucks all the time, and truckers are passing us all the time on these roads. For people who are drive-in, who are not truckers, what would you say to them when they see the trucks? Is it something that they should get frustrated about? Like, how dare you go much faster than me? What sort of relationship, what would you encourage non-truckers to think when they see the big rigs driving by them?
Be aware that those people are paid by the mile and that they're working, right? It's hard for four-wheelers to remember that. But also, stopping a big rig is a slow and difficult process. So, frequently if there's a gap in front of an 18-wheeler, cars are tempted to rush into that gap in order to get ahead. And the truck can't stop. They have air brakes. They're incredibly inefficient braking system, so it can't stop. So just being aware that they leave space on the road so that they won't kill you. And if you slip into that space, it's not their fault. They're just trying to be safe out there. And they need extra space, and we need to understand that they're doing a job, and we need everything that they do. And we could have a little respect for them as professional workers and give them the space to do the job they need, right? The way that four-wheelers tend to act like the road are ours, and I don't know what these trucks are doing there. And then we go to stores and think that the food just kind of magically appeared on the shelves. So being aware that we need them, and we could do things to make their lives easier rather than sort of resent that they exist.
It's an uncomfortable realization to have. There was an earthquake back in November, and the roads had some damage. And so the threat was that the trucks wouldn't be able to get from Anchorage to Fairbanks. And then what would we do in our grocery stores? And that's when people start really like, oh, wait a minute, that's like a real part of what happens in Alaska. Again, we could talk all day. You're speaking tonight more about this sort of work at 5:30 here in the Bunnell campus. But in the chapters of your book, the chapter names are some trucker terms that I was hoping to ask about, and then you could describe sort of what they mean. One of them is what's your 20, which I remember from growing up. I think it's like, where are you?
Yeah.
So it's like,
it just means where are you right now? But it's, a trucker way of saying that. So if you, earlier you asked, can people meet each other? What's your 20 is a way of saying like, where are you? And maybe we could cross paths, or just where are you? Because I'm curious what the weather conditions are like there. So it's a way of kind of checking in about location. And it also reminds the rest of the world that truckers are always moving. Their location is never predictable. And that kind of fluidity through space is one of the thrills of the job.
In the front of the book, actually, you have a diagram, the process of what it takes to take a load from one place to another. And there's so much stuff that goes on there. And one of the things that jumped out to me was you have to plot your own course. Like you have to decide where to go. Nobody is telling you how to get from one place to another. And then along the way, you have to deal with checking in and the DOT at these way stations. And when I pass a way station, they seem to usually be closed. Is that an issue? Like if you can't pull into a closed way station, do you have to call someone to open it up? Or
they have now embedded in the road scales. So there's a computer in your truck, and scales are buried in the road. So when a weigh station is closed, it's usually just closed because they can weigh you as you go, and you get a automatic pass-through that reads in the computer that's in your truck. So the times that weigh stations are open, it's just to get the trucks that don't have automatic readers in their truck, or to check more carefully as a way to kind of regulate or ticket truckers who are overweight or illegal for some other reason.
And there certainly have been stories in the news of tragedies that have happened with people with human trafficking and things of people into trucks. And that's just, we're not talking about that today. That's a whole other scary thing. But one of the things you also mentioned in the book a little bit is you were talking with someone on a plane, and they described how it was to pave these way stations, and the engineering have to go into making sure that it can handle these. I mean, how much weight can go inside a 18 or 36 wheeler? I don't know how many wheels you can have.
I would have known this when I was driving a lot. And there's per axle, you have to have it distributed. And then as a trucker, you know how much the tractor weighs and which axle that weight falls on. So when you go over state lines, sometimes you need to move the tandems forward or back to meet the regulations of a different state about what weight proportions can be. I mean, truckers who are actively doing this could rattle these numbers off for you immediately, but if I told you, it'd be wrong and they'd make fun of me. So,
and that's all stuff you have to keep in your mind as you're doing your job.
Yeah.
Okay, so these phrases, dragonfly.
Yeah, that's a great way of describing what it feels like to go up and down a hill as a trucker, right? Dragonfly means when you're going up a hill, it feels like you're dragging that weight, right? You are sitting in the cabin, you're like hauling it personally. And that's a way that the truck feels like an extension of your body. It feels like something you're doing. And then when you're going down, that weight is pushing you, right? So that's the feeling of the fly, like you drag and then you fly. The flying for me is terrifying, right? Because the brakes don't work very well. You're going down a hill and that's pushing you and there's nothing you can do to stop. So things they'll say is, whatever gear you're in going up, stay in that gear going down, because the engine will slow you down in a way that the brakes won't, right? So though you're tempted to just let the truck roll and, you know, save gas by letting the weight push you down, you're going to lose control rapidly if you do that. So you stay in a low gear and go down the hill in the gear you came up in order to keep control of it. But just that feeling of like pulling it and then letting it push you, and that kind of the sort of connection you have with that process. That's what Dragonfly gives you a sense of.
That must be super scary in like rain or snow or ice, particularly.
Ice, yes. Yeah, the sense that if the trailer starts to move, it's obviously going to take you, right? So if it starts to swing, you're going with it. Yeah, you see a lot of pictures of this on the internet.
Yeah, it's terrifying. The last one I want to ask you about is sailboat races. That sounds fun.
Have you ever sailed?
No. I've been on a boat.
It's not a fast process. Like some people call it elephant races, right? It's when if a truck is governed so it can only drive at a set speed limit, and this is more rare up here than it is in the lower 48. In Canada, all trucks have to be governed. So, you know, they're different sort of regulations. But if a truck has a maximum speed limit that it can't go beyond, then passing is a very slow process, right? Say someone is in the right lane driving 62, and the person coming up behind them can drive 63 or 64. They're going to want to pass, but it's going to take forever, right? So if the person who can drive 64 gets in the left lane to pass, to get beyond that truck is going to take a good 10 minutes before they can pull over. And that's what the phrase sailboat races describes, right? So all the cars behind them that want to go like 68 or 70 are like fussing and going like, what are you doing? Why don't you give it some gas and get beyond this truck? They can't. The truck won't go faster than 64. It won't. Because the engine is governed at that. That's another of the sort of technological restrictions on trucking that people don't know about.
No.
Literally in Canada, all trucks have to have governors on the engine.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, like I said, there's so much. But the subject of the book, I think in itself, to get back to the why you're here tonight and the subject of the book, is that there are these marginalized part of American culture that has a representation inside this very important industry. Mm-hmm. And something that I had never really considered or thought about before until I saw that you were coming up to talk about your book. Was this, when you first had the idea for the book, did it make sense? Was it like, oh my God, someone needs to put these voices on paper. Someone needs to share. Did you have a responsibility, or was it a joy for you as an author and a storyteller to uncover this heretofore untapped resource of story to share with the world? Responsibility or fun?
I spent 10 years working as a car mechanic, and I'm an out lesbian, and I loved it. I love like the link between queer people and blue collar jobs. And I feel like there is not enough information that we have. Like there's an assumption that gay and lesbian people are like white and they live in New York and they're architects, right? There's that stereotype about what queer people are. And that does not represent us in the world at large. So my job is to like get out there and meet people who do blue collar jobs and are fun and lively and fascinating queer people and tell the story of their experience. So we don't fall into that kind of myth that queers are rich and white and live in New York, because that's just not true. I mean, they're everywhere. They're here. We're like everywhere you go, there are queer and trans people doing all the things. And like they are great. And I love meeting them and hearing their stories and like getting to, you know, talk about who they are and what they do. So that is my favorite part of the job, is meeting the people and talking to them about their lives.
And Fairbanks can hear you talk about that tonight right here on the campus. What's your next book?
I'm going to write about sex trafficking, which you referred to.
That's not happy. That is not a happy, fun book to write. That must be heartbreaking.
Well,
yeah, I know. There's nothing more to say. Tonight, it's more life-affirming stories of people, of normal people doing a normal job that is essential for our society.
Well, thank you very much. I hope I see some of you tonight.
I hope so too. And thanks for going through the process of getting us connection. I know it took a little bit. It's so great to talk to you. Such a fascinating topic. It inflamed my imagination right under it. I could not wait to talk to you. So I'm so glad you took some time to do it. Hope you have a great time in Fairbanks. I know there's a lot of people who are looking forward to hearing you and meeting you tonight. So thank you very much.
Thank you. See you soon.
All right.